The gunshot echoed across the dusty main street of Silvercreek, Wyoming Territory, 1872, causing Eleanor Lawson to drop the basket of eggs she'd been carrying to her father's general store. Her hands trembled as she knelt to gather the broken shells, eyes downcast to hide the tears threatening to spill. The townsfolk's laughter stung worse than the wasted food that now soaked into the dirt. "Look at poor Eleanor, jumping at shadows again," Martha Wilkinson called out from the boardwalk. "Girl's got less spine than a rattlesnake's dinner." More laughter followed as Eleanor's cheeks burned with shame. At 22, she'd hoped to outgrow the timidity that had plagued her since childhood, but living in a frontier town where danger lurked at every corner only seemed to heighten her anxieties. She'd never learned to ride properly, couldn't shoot a gun, and found herself paralyzed with fear during the frequent saloon brawls that spilled into the streets. "Leave her be," a deep voice cut through the mockery. "Not everyone needs to wear bravado like a cheap perfume." Eleanor looked up to see Samuel Forrester dismounting his chestnut stallion. The newest ranch hand at the Triple Creek spread stood tall among the townsfolk, his presence commanding respect despite having arrived in Silvercreek only 3 months prior. Unlike the other cowboys who frequented town with loud voices and roughhousing, Samuel carried himself with a quiet confidence that made others listen when he spoke. "Mind your business, Forrester," Martha snapped. "You ain't been here long enough to know our ways." Samuel ignored her, kneeling beside Eleanor. "Here," he said softly, helping gather what remained of her basket. His calloused hands moved with surprising gentleness. "Don't let them trouble you none." "Thank you," Eleanor whispered, so quietly she wondered if he'd heard her at all. He smiled, the corner of his eyes crinkling beneath the brim of his worn Stetson. "Your timidity isn't something to mock. Sometimes it's the quiet ones who see what others miss." Eleanor couldn't help but notice the scar running along his jawline, partially hidden by several days' worth of stubble. His eyes, a deep green that reminded her of the forest beyond town, held a steadiness she found comforting. "I should get back to the store," she murmured, standing with her now empty basket. "I'll walk with you," Samuel offered, leading his horse by the reins. As they moved down the boardwalk, Eleanor could feel the stares of townsfolk following them. Samuel Forrester had a reputation as a man who could calm the wildest horses and shoot with deadly accuracy when needed, though he rarely carried a gun in town. Rumors swirled about his past. Some said he'd ridden with lawmen in Texas. Others whispered he'd escaped trouble in Colorado. Whatever the truth, Eleanor found herself curious about this cowboy who defended her without hesitation. "I'm not always this frightened," she said suddenly, surprising herself with the admission. "It's just the noise, the unexpectedness of things." Samuel nodded. "Nothing wrong with caution. Saved my life more than once." He glanced down at her. "Your father runs the general store." "Yes." "Since my mother passed 5 years ago, it's just been the two of us." "That's a lot of responsibility for a young woman." They reached the storefront of Lawson General Goods, where Eleanor's father was arranging a display of new tooling leather. "Eleanor, what happened to the eggs?" Harold Lawson's bushy eyebrows furrowed with concern. "There was a gunshot, Pa. I dropped them." Eleanor avoided mentioning the mockery. Harold's expression softened. "Well, accidents happen." He turned his attention to Samuel. "Mr. Forrester, isn't it?" "What brings you to our establishment today?" "Just escorting your daughter, sir." Samuel tipped his hat respectfully. "And I'm in need of some supplies. Thought I might place an order for the ranch while I'm here." Harold beamed, ever the merchant. "Come inside." "Eleanor, mind the counter while I help Mr. Forrester." Eleanor moved behind the polished wooden counter, watching as her father guided Samuel through the store. There was something different about this cowboy, a gentleness beneath his strength that intrigued her. She found herself straightening her simple blue dress and tucking a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear. Later that evening, after Samuel had departed with promises to return for his order in a week's time, Harold Lawson studied his daughter as they prepared their modest supper. "That Forrester fellow seems decent enough," he remarked casually. "Not like some of those rough types from the cattle drives." Eleanor kept her eyes on the stew she was stirring. "He was kind today. When I dropped the eggs, some people were laughing." Harold frowned. "Was it the Wilkinson woman again? I've half a mind to refuse her credit next time." "It doesn't matter, Pa." Eleanor ladled stew into bowls. "I should be used to it by now." "You shouldn't have to get used to cruelty, Eleanor." Her father sat heavily at their small table. "Your mother was the same way, you know, sensitive to the world around her. It's not a weakness, it's a different kind of strength." Eleanor smiled sadly, thinking of her mother's gentle nature. Catherine Lawson had been beloved in Silvercreek for her kindness, though many had considered her too refined for frontier life. Eleanor had inherited her mother's delicate features and soft-spoken manner, along with her tendency to startle at sudden movements or loud noises. Mr. Forrester said something similar," she admitted. Harold's eyebrows rose with interest. "Did he now?" He said, "My timidity isn't something to mock. That sometimes quiet people see what others miss." She looked up from her stew. "Do you think that's true, Pa?" "I think that young man might be wiser than his years suggest." Harold smiled. "And I think he might be worth knowing better." The following week passed slowly for Eleanor. She found herself glancing toward the door whenever the bell above it jangled, hoping to see Samuel's tall frame. When he finally appeared on the appointed day, she nearly dropped the bolt of calico she was measuring for Mrs. Peterson. "Careful there," Samuel said with a smile, stepping forward as if to catch the fabric if needed. "I didn't mean to startle you." "You didn't," Eleanor lied, feeling her cheeks warm. "I was just finishing with Mrs. Peterson." The older woman glanced between them with poorly concealed interest before gathering her purchase. "Thank you, dear. Do tell your father I'll be bringing those preserves by next week." She nodded politely to Samuel before departing. Left alone, Eleanor found herself suddenly tongue-tied. Samuel removed his hat, revealing dark hair in need of a trim. He looked cleaner than she remembered, as if he'd made an effort before coming to town. "Your father mentioned you might help me gather these supplies," he said, producing a list. "If you're not too busy." "Of course." Eleanor took the paper, noticing his neat handwriting. "We received the coffee beans you ordered. Pa says they're the finest we've had in months." As they moved around the store, gathering flour, sugar, coffee, and other necessities, Eleanor gradually relaxed in Samuel's presence. He told her about life at the Triple Creek Ranch, the pre-dawn rises, the satisfaction of working with the horses, the camaraderie among the hands. "And you?" he asked as she wrapped a block of cheese in waxed paper. "What do you do when you're not helping in the store?" The question caught her off guard. Few people ever inquired about her interests. "I read," she admitted. "And I keep a small garden behind our house, nothing special." "What do you grow?" "Herbs mostly, some vegetables, and flowers. My mother loved flowers." Samuel nodded. "My own mother had a way with plants, could make anything grow even in the driest Texas soil." "Is that where you're from, Texas?" A shadow crossed his face. "Originally. Left when I was 18. Been working ranches across the territories since then." Eleanor sensed there was more to the story but didn't press. She finished tallying his purchases. "That'll be $8.43. Samuel counted out the money carefully. "I was wondering," he said, his usual confidence seeming to waver, "if you might consider joining me for supper at the hotel restaurant tomorrow evening." Eleanor's heart fluttered. "Supper with you?" "Yes, madam." He placed his hat back on his head. "Unless you'd rather not." "No." "I mean, yes, I would like that." She took a steadying breath. "I'd need to ask my father first." Samuel's smile returned. "Of course, I'll call on you properly tomorrow at 6 if that suits." After he left, Eleanor stood frozen behind the counter, replaying the conversation in her mind. A supper invitation from Samuel Forrester. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. That evening she approached her father nervously. "Pa, Samuel Forrester has invited me to supper tomorrow at the hotel restaurant. Would you allow it?" Harold looked up from his ledger, surprise evident on his weathered face. "Forrester, eh?" he considered for a moment. He seems a decent sort, pays his bills promptly, which says something about a man's character. He studied his daughter's hopeful expression. Yes, you may go. But I expect you home by 9, no later. Eleanor hugged him impulsively. Thank you, Pa. The next day passed in a blur of anticipation and anxiety. Eleanor closed the store early to prepare, washing her hair with her precious lavender soap and pressing her best dress, a dark green wool with modest lace trim at the collar and cuffs. She rarely had occasion to wear it, and the color brought out the auburn highlights in her brown hair. At precisely 6 o'clock, a knock sounded at their door. Eleanor's hands trembled as she smoothed her skirts one last time. Harold answered, inviting Samuel into their small sitting room. The cowboy had cleaned up remarkably well, wearing a pressed white shirt under a dark vest, his usually unruly hair combed neatly. He held his hat in his hands, looking almost as nervous as Eleanor felt. Mr. Lawson, he greeted formally. I appreciate you allowing me to escort your daughter this evening. Harold nodded approvingly at Samuel's respectful manner. You'll have her home by 9. Yes, sir, you have my word. Eleanor stepped forward and Samuel's expression softened visibly. Miss Lawson, you look beautiful. Thank you, she whispered, accepting the arm he offered. They walked the short distance to the Silver Palace Hotel, the finest establishment in Silvercreek. Though modest compared to big city hotels, it featured a dining room with tablecloths and real silverware, a luxury in the frontier town. Several heads turned as they entered, and Eleanor felt her usual anxiety rising at being the center of attention. Samuel seemed to sense her discomfort, placing his hand gently over hers where it rested on his arm. Just breathe, he murmured. They're only curious because you're the prettiest woman in the room. His words brought a blush to her cheeks as the hotel owner, Mrs. Hargrove, led them to a table near the window. My best table for you, Mr. Forrester, she said with a wink that made Eleanor wonder if Samuel had made special arrangements. Once seated, Eleanor struggled to maintain conversation, acutely aware of the glances from other diners. Samuel, however, seemed perfectly at ease, ordering for them both with confidence. I heard there's a social dance planned for next month, he said as they waited for their food. The ranch hands are all talking about it. Yes, for the harvest celebration. Eleanor fidgeted with her napkin. I usually help serve refreshments. You don't dance, she shook her head. I've never learned properly, and crowds make me uneasy. Samuel considered this. What if you had the right partner, someone who wouldn't let anything happen to you? The intensity in his gaze made Eleanor's breath catch. Are you offering to be that partner, Mr. Forrester? Samuel, he corrected gently. And yes, I am. Their food arrived: roast beef with potatoes for him, chicken with vegetables for her. As they ate, Samuel gradually drew Eleanor out of her shell, asking about her books, her garden, her memories of her mother. In turn, he shared stories of his childhood in Texas, though she noticed he carefully avoided certain topics. My father was a rancher, he explained. Taught me everything I know about horses, said I had a natural way with them from the time I could walk. Is he still in Texas? Samuel's expression grew distant. No, he passed some years back. He seemed about to say more, but instead reached across the table to touch her hand. I hope you don't mind my directness, Eleanor, but there's something about you that caught my attention from the first day I arrived in town. A kind of gentleness I haven't encountered much in my travels. Eleanor was grateful for the dimly lit restaurant as her face flushed with pleasure. Most people just think I'm afraid of everything. Fear and awareness aren't the same thing, Samuel replied. The most dangerous men I've known were the ones who didn't know what fear was. He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. Your timidity, as some call it, I see it differently. It's a shelter of sorts, a quiet place in a noisy world. A shelter? Eleanor questioned. Yes. His thumb traced a small circle on her hand. Your timidity is my shelter. When I'm around you, I don't have to be the person everyone expects me to be. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within Eleanor. For the first time, She felt truly seen not as the frightened shopkeeper's daughter, but as someone whose sensitivity might be valued rather than mocked. Their evening ended too quickly. Samuel escorted her home under a canopy of stars, his arm steady beneath her hand. At her door, he removed his hat and bowed slightly. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," he said. "Might I call on you again?" Eleanor nodded, finding courage in his presence. "I'd like that very much." In the weeks that followed, Samuel became a regular visitor to Silvercreek, finding reasons to ride into town even when the ranch didn't need supplies. He began helping Eleanor and her father with tasks around the store, fixing a leaky roof, building new shelving, unloading heavy merchandise when it arrived on the stagecoach. Harold observed their growing attachment with quiet approval. "That young man rides 15 miles just to see you smile," he told Eleanor one evening. "And I haven't seen you this happy since before your mother passed." Eleanor couldn't deny the truth in her father's words. Samuel's steady presence had begun to change her. She still startled at loud noises and preferred quiet corners to crowded rooms, but when she was with him, her fears seemed less overwhelming. One crisp autumn afternoon, Samuel arrived with an unexpected proposal. "I'd like to teach you to ride," he said as they walked along the creek that gave the Triple Creek Ranch its name. Eleanor stopped, alarm crossing her features. "I can't. I've tried before." "With the wrong horse and the wrong teacher," Samuel insisted gently. "I've brought Daisy." He gestured to where a docile Palomino mare grazed nearby. "She's the gentlest horse on the ranch. Even the children ride her." Eleanor eyed the horse warily. "I'll fall." "No," Samuel took her hand. "You won't, because I'll be right beside you." After much persuasion, Eleanor found herself seated atop Daisy, Samuel's strong hand steady on her waist. Her whole body trembled with fear. "I can't do this," she whispered. "Yes, you can." Samuel's voice was firm but kind. "Hold the reins like I showed you, that's right." "Now I'm going to lead Daisy forward very slowly." As the horse began to move, Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut. "Samuel, I'm right here," he reassured her. "Open your eyes, Eleanor, see what Daisy sees." Gradually, Eleanor opened her eyes, amazed to find herself moving smoothly along the creek bank. Samuel walked alongside, one hand on Daisy's bridle, the other on Eleanor's leg, providing constant reassurance. "You're doing it," he encouraged. "How does it feel?" To her surprise, Eleanor found herself smiling. "Like flying, slowly." They continued for nearly an hour, Samuel patiently teaching Eleanor the basics of horsemanship. By the time they returned to where they'd started, Eleanor's fear had transformed into tentative confidence. "Next time you'll do even better," Samuel promised as he helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist. Eleanor looked up at him, breathless from more than just the riding lesson. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "I never will," he replied softly, and before she could respond, he leaned down and pressed his lips gently to hers. The kiss was brief, but perfect, a promise sealed beneath the golden autumn sun. When they parted, Eleanor felt as though something fundamental had shifted within her. The town's mockery, which had once cut so deeply, now seemed insignificant compared to the way Samuel looked at her. As October gave way to November, their courtship blossomed. Samuel taught Eleanor to ride with growing confidence, and she introduced him to her favorite books, reading aloud to him on Sunday afternoons in her father's parlor. The townsfolk gradually became accustomed to seeing them together, though Eleanor still endured occasional barbed comments. "Never thought you'd catch yourself a man, Eleanor Lawson," Martha Wilkinson remarked acidly one day at the mercantile. "Especially not one like Forrester. What does he see in such a frightened little mouse?" Before Eleanor could respond, Samuel appeared behind her, having overheard. "I see strength where others see weakness," he said evenly, "and kindness where others show none. Good day, Mrs. Wilkinson." He guided Eleanor outside, his jaw tight with anger. "Don't let her poison what we have." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "I won't, not anymore." Their relationship might have continued in this peaceful fashion had trouble not arrived in Silvercreek the following week. Three rough-looking men rode into town, heading straight for the saloon. Eleanor noticed them from the store window, something about their demeanor setting off warning signals in her mind. "They look dangerous," she told her father, who was preparing to close for the evening. Harold glanced out. "Probably just passing through, cattle buyers or prospectors, most likely." But Eleanor's unease persisted, especially when she spotted Samuel entering the saloon shortly after the strangers arrived. He rarely frequented the establishment, preferring to spend his evenings with Eleanor and her father. That night, unable to sleep, Eleanor was startled by urgent knocking at their door. She hurried downstairs to find Samuel on their porch, his expression grim. "I need to speak with you," he said, his voice tight. "Both of you." Once inside, Samuel paced their small parlor. "Those men who arrived today, I know them. Or rather, they know me." He stopped, facing Eleanor and her father. "I haven't been entirely truthful about my past," Harold frowned. "What do you mean?" Samuel took a deep breath. 5 years ago, I was a deputy in a small town near Austin. There was a band of outlaws, the Clayton brothers. They robbed banks, stagecoaches, whatever they could. I helped track them down. His hands clenched at his sides. There was a shootout. I killed their youngest brother. Eleanor gasped softly. The other two swore vengeance. "They've been hunting me ever since." Samuel looked directly at Eleanor, his eyes pleading for understanding. "I changed my name, kept moving. I thought I'd lost them when I came here. I was wrong." "Those men in the saloon," Eleanor whispered. "They're the Clayton brothers," Samuel nodded. "They recognized me tonight. I need to leave Silvercreek immediately. If I stay, they'll come after me, and they won't care who gets hurt in the process." Harold rose, his expression resolute. "I'll fetch Sheriff Miller." "No," Samuel said sharply. "The Claytons have friends in low places. By the time the law gets involved, people could be dead. I won't risk it." He turned to Eleanor, his voice softening. "I came to say goodbye." Eleanor felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her. "You're leaving, just like that. It's the only way to keep you safe." Samuel reached for her hands. "These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. I never meant to bring danger to your door." Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks. "When will you come back?" Samuel's silence was answer enough. This wasn't a temporary departure. He was leaving for good, drawing the threat away from Silvercreek, away from her. "I can't let you do this," she said suddenly, surprising both men with her firmness. "There must be another way." "Eleanor," her father began gently, but she shook her head. "No, Pa. Samuel has been running for 5 years. It has to end." She turned to Samuel. "You said my timidity is your shelter. Well, your strength has been mine. I won't let you face this alone." Samuel's expression was a mixture of love and fear. "Eleanor, these men are killers. They won't hesitate to hurt you to get to me." "Then we need a plan," she insisted. "One that doesn't involve you sacrificing yourself." The three of them talked long into the night, weighing options, considering strategies. By dawn, they had agreed on a course of action dangerous, but with a chance of success. Harold would ride at first light to fetch Sheriff Miller from the next town over, where he was attending court proceedings. Meanwhile, Samuel would seem to flee, leaving a trail obvious enough for the Clayton brothers to follow. The trail, however, would lead to a narrow canyon where Eleanor's father occasionally hunted, a place where Samuel, with the element of surprise, might have an advantage. Eleanor would remain safely in town, waiting for her father to return with reinforcements. At least, that was the plan. What Samuel and Harold hadn't counted on was Eleanor's newfound determination. After they departed Harold toward the county seat, Samuel ostensibly fleeing town, Eleanor penned a quick note explaining her actions. Then, hands trembling but resolve firm, she mounted Daisy and followed Samuel's trail. The mare, now comfortable with Eleanor, moved steadily through the early morning light. Eleanor had never ridden alone before, but her weeks of lessons with Samuel gave her enough confidence to continue. Fear clutched at her throat with every sound from the surrounding woods, but she pressed on, driven by something stronger than timidity, love. She caught up to Samuel as he prepared his position in the canyon, concealing his horse and checking his rifle. His expression when he spotted her was one of horror. "Eleanor, what in God's name? I couldn't let you face them alone," she said, dismounting with more grace than she would have believed possible a few months earlier. "Before you say it's too dangerous, I know, but I also know I can help." Samuel gripped her shoulders. "How? By getting yourself killed. The Claytons will be here within the hour." Eleanor stood her ground. "You taught me to ride when everyone said I was too frightened. Now I'm asking you to trust me." She explained her idea simple but potentially effective. Samuel listened, his initial anger giving way to reluctant admiration. "It's still dangerous. Life is dangerous," Eleanor replied with newfound wisdom. "Especially loving someone." The words hung between them, neither having spoken so plainly of love before. Samuel's expression softened and he pulled her into a fierce embrace. "When this is over," he whispered against her hair, "I want a future with you, Eleanor Lawson, if you'll have me." "I will," she promised. "Now let's make sure we have that future." They worked quickly, positioning Eleanor and both horses where they could implement her plan. Samuel took up a defensive position among the rocks, his rifle at the ready. The wait was excruciating. Eleanor's every nerve screamed with tension, but she forced herself to remain still, remembering Samuel's words about the value of her awareness, her caution. The Clayton brothers arrived just as the sun reached its zenith, their horses picking their way carefully into the canyon. The older one, gray-haired but still powerfully built, scanned the rocks suspiciously. "He's here somewhere," he growled to his brother. "Tracks lead straight in." "Could be a trap, Emmett," the younger one warned. "Course it's a trap," Emmett Clayton sneered. "But Forrester, or whatever he calls himself now, is gonna die today either way." It was the moment Eleanor had been waiting for. Taking a deep breath, she led Daisy into view, her hands visibly empty, her posture deliberately vulnerable. "Please," she called, her voice carrying the genuine fear she felt. "Please help me. My horse threw me. I think my ankle's broken." The Clayton brothers exchanged suspicious glances before the younger one dismounted, approaching cautiously with his gun drawn. "What are you doing out here, girl?" he demanded. Eleanor summoned tears, something that came easily given her terror. "I was riding to my uncle's homestead. Please, I just need help getting back to town." The younger Clayton lowered his gun slightly, peering at her ankle. In that moment of distraction, Samuel emerged silently from the rocks behind Emmett, pressing his rifle barrel against the older outlaw's back. "Drop your weapons," he commanded. "Both of you." The younger Clayton whirled, raising his gun, but froze when he saw his brother at Samuel's mercy. "Don't try it, Lyle," Emmett growled. "He'll shoot." "You're damn right I will," Samuel confirmed. 5 years is long enough. This ends today one way or another." Eleanor watched, heart pounding, as Lyle Clayton's gaze darted between his brother Samuel and herself. The moment stretched unbearably. Then, with a sudden oath, Lyle swung his gun toward Eleanor. 3 shots exploded almost simultaneously. Eleanor screamed, dropping to the ground more from instinct than conscious thought. When she looked up, Lyle Clayton lay motionless in the dirt. Emmett was on his knees, clutching a bleeding arm, his face contorted with rage. And Samuel was still standing, his rifle smoking. "You missed your chance, Forrester," Emmett snarled. "I'll hunt you till." He never finished the sentence. More gunshots echoed through the canyon as Sheriff Miller and his deputies, led by Harold Lawson, arrived on the scene. "Everyone hold," Miller shouted, taking in the situation with experienced eyes. In the chaos that followed, Eleanor remained curiously calm. She watched as the lawmen secured Emmett Clayton, as her father rushed to her side, as Samuel explained the situation to Sheriff Miller. The fear that had defined her for so long seemed distant, now not gone, but transformed into something she could manage. Later, after statements had been taken and Emmett Clayton locked safely in the county jail, Eleanor sat with Samuel on her father's porch. The evening was cool, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "You could have been killed today," Samuel said, his voice still tight with lingering fear. When Lyle aimed at you, but I wasn't, Eleanor interrupted gently, and neither were you. Samuel took her hand, his thumb tracing the delicate bones. You were incredible, Eleanor. Braver than any man I've known. He shook his head in wonder. All this time I thought I was helping you overcome your fears, but you've been teaching me all along. Teaching you what? That there's more than one kind of courage. He looked into her eyes. The Claytons have haunted me for 5 years. I've been running, hiding, never letting myself get close to anyone, until you, Eleanor leaned against his shoulder. What happens now? Sheriff Miller says there's a reward for the Claytons, has been for years. Samuel's arm slipped around her waist. Enough to buy a small ranch, perhaps, if that's something you might want. Eleanor's heart quickened. Are you proposing, Samuel Forrester? He smiled, reaching into his pocket to produce a simple gold band. I got this in Cheyenne last month, been carrying it, waiting for the right moment. He held it between them. I love you, Eleanor Lawson, your gentle heart, your quiet strength, everything about you. Will you marry me? Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but for once they were tears of joy rather than fear. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. As Samuel slipped the ring onto her finger, Eleanor thought of all the times she'd been mocked for her timidity, all the whispers and laughter she'd endured. How strange that what others saw as her greatest weakness had led her to her greatest strength, a love that would shelter them both through whatever lay ahead. 1 year later, Eleanor stood on the porch of their small ranch house, watching as Samuel guided their newest foal across the pasture. Their wedding had been simple but joyous, with her father beaming proudly as he gave her away. The reward money, combined with their savings, had indeed been enough to purchase a modest property not far from Silvercreek. Eleanor smiled, one hand resting on her slightly rounded belly where their first child grew. She still startled at sudden noises occasionally, still preferred quiet evenings at home to the bustle of town. But she no longer saw these traits as flaws to be hidden or overcome. Samuel looked up, spotting her on the porch. He grinned and waved, that same smile that had first captured her heart. Eleanor waved back, thinking of the words he'd spoken that day on the street, words that had changed everything. Your timidity is my shelter. In a world that valued brashness and bravado, they had found in each other something rarer and more precious, a love that honored both strength and gentleness, courage and caution, each completing what the other lacked. And in that perfect balance, they had built a home.